whether or not psychedelic therapists should have had their own experiences with the psychedelics they're providing. And there's obviously two camps on this, one of which is, yes, they should. And the other camp is, no, they shouldn't, because I've heard arguments like, well, you wouldn't be concerned about a psychiatrist prescribing, Zoloft, if they've never had Zoloft in their life, or, would you not go see a male gynecologist because they don't have a womb, or like these kinds of like comparisons that it's like, no, if you've got therapy experience, then that's actually greater than psychedelic experience when it comes to providing psychedelic therapy. So you don't need psychedelics. You don't need to have that experience. And the other camp being like, if you've never had a psychedelic experience, you have no idea what it's actually like. And you really can't support a person while they're in their experience. Not really. What's your take on this?
I'm trying to find a professional way to say this. I think if you want to be a psychedelic therapist, you should take as much drugs as possible. I have obviously failed at finding a professional way to say this. And legitimately, it takes time and effort to figure out how to do that. But you get a whole different perspective, and it's a false comparison to compare it to a psychiatrist who's prescribing Zoloft. It's not the same. That tweaks our system, but it doesn't take us into other realms. Now, one thing that's interesting is, these women elders, the high priestesses, I'm calling them, they don't do therapy, so they're sitting. Now, that's a specific role. Now we have psychedelic therapists who do both roles. They do therapy and they do the sitting. Those are two separate functions with two different skill sets and gifts. Someone can be a wonderful therapist and not be very good at sitting there for 6-7 hours. So, and maybe some people can do both, but we have to understand that these are two separate roles. But I'm a very strong believer in anybody working in this field, either sitting with someone journeying or doing psychedelic therapy before or after. They need to really know the terrain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't done a survey, so this is just a hot take without a lot of data. But my sense is that the people who are saying that you don't need to take psychedelics or have had a psychedelic experience to provide psychedelic therapy haven't experienced psychedelics.
They don't know what you're talking about, is what you're saying. Which
essentially, yes.
There it is. That's the problem.
Yeah. Or they've had one or two experiences and they think that qualifies them to have a real sense of what it's all about. Or they've read a bunch of other people's experiences and they think that gives them a good sense of what it's all about. Or they're recognizing that realistically, either from an ethical standpoint of like telling someone they have to take psychedelics if they're going to provide psychedelic therapy, or from a cost and like the numbers game of like, realistically, we're not going to be able to boom out all the therapists that need to get out as soon as they can get out in order for all these companies that are putting in all this money to actually make a profit, and expect that each of those therapists are properly and fully experienced on psychedelics as a journey they've been on, or are, have been on many times, that they've been guided and they've been deep. If we have that expectation, we're just not going to be able to get the hordes of therapists out there that we need.
I don't know how to solve that problem. That's a realistic issue. But I do know a handful of good, solid therapists who are working on themselves very diligently with one or another of the medicines. And so they are seeking out that experience. It is possible. And of course, because there's such a need for people trained in this realm, they're also working with people with integration. So they're doing both at the same time because the need is so great. So I have to say, yes, I understand that, but make an effort. Make an effort to take the drugs, to get the experience. Yeah. And I told one of the elders, I said, you do know that just licensed therapists don't necessarily need to have had their own therapy. And she didn't know that. She couldn't believe it. How can you be a therapist and not have had your own therapy? Well, it's not always required. And so people don't always do it. And she just was horrified at the thought of that. I mean, one of the axioms is know the medicine. You do not serve a medicine you do not know. And so this is, you really need to know the territory. And when we look at countertransference, having this is why analysts have their own analysis, so they know how to work with their own countertransference. And so the same thing would come up with people sitting. I never have done any underground work. And I know my countertransference would involve a lot of my own inner fear. It's like, oh my God, what's happening now? Well, that's not very helpful. That's not a good intervention if you're sitting, but that would be my own countertransference. This is why I'm not gifted. And I don't meet the qualifications that these elders meet. This is not my work in the world. And so I think you have to have your own experience to know where you get scared, where you're worried, where you lose track of things. You have to know within yourself where your person is traveling.